all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beachum. I'm the one who will be here with you each and every Wednesday, interviewing a different consciousness changemaker that is also out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can hear me discussing topics such as my favorite thought-provoking quotes, reading and discussing wisdom from empowering books, playing clips from various inspirational spiritual teachers, sharing a bit of mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and essentially digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you into positive vibrations on a consistent basis. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's interview episode, I'm very excited to have Garnet Schulhauser here with me on the show. Garnet is an author who has written several books about his ongoing encounters with his spirit guide, Albert. Hey there, Garnet. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you, Brandon. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be on your show.
I'm absolutely excited to have you as well. I am, as all the listeners know, I am a sucker for a good paranormal story, and you are just ripe with them. So I'm anxious to dig in and hear all about your unique tale. Before we do so, I'd like to start off with the same question that I always start off with. You're in an elevator. You've got 10 floors to answer. The guy next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" What do you say?
My passion is to spread the message from my spirit guide, Albert, to all people in the world. And his message is one of love and compassion for all humans, all the animals who share our planet, and for Mother Earth herself.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that certainly aligns with what most people I have on the show want to do in one way, shape, or form. So why don't you, before you get into your story with Albert, why don't you share a little bit about your personal story that led to your meeting with Albert?
Sure. Well, I was a lawyer, practiced law for 34 years in Calgary. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan, raised as a Roman Catholic, and as the years wore on, I began to sort of doubt a lot of the dogma of the Catholic Church, began to question it. A lot of it didn't make any sense to me. So then I was sort of in no man's land, sort of casting about for a new paradigm to latch onto. And I constantly asked myself the eternal questions of life, like, who am I? Why am I here? What happens to me when I die? And then one day I ran into my spirit guide and all my questions were answered. And how it happened was I was still practicing law. It was back in 2007. And I was strolling down the street one day on a sunny afternoon in May, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a homeless man just jumps out in front of me, just stops me right in my tracks.
Right.
He looked like a typical homeless man. I mean, he was, long, stringy haired, straggly beard, and dirty, slept-in clothes. But there was something very different about this guy, Brandon, which is the reason I didn't sort of do a sidestep around him, because he had these amazing, dazzling blue eyes. They were penetrating deep within me. I felt like he was looking right into the depths of my soul, and that he knew everything about me. And at the same time, his eyes were sending me this wave, this gush of pure, unconditional love that was filling my whole body with an amazing sense of peace and security and well-being. So I stood there like a deer caught in the headlights. I didn't want to move. I was soaking this all up. It was an amazing feeling, like I'd never experienced before. And I don't know how long I was there. It was like I was in a time warp. Like I didn't know whether I stood there for 10 seconds or 10 hours. But then he broke the spell by saying to me, "Why are you here?" And then he quickly disappeared into a nearby store. Well, when I finally collected my wits, I decided I better go and find this guy and find out who he was. So I went into the store he had disappeared into, but he was nowhere to be seen. I walked back out on the street, walked up and down that street for several blocks, couldn't see him. He had basically disappeared into thin air. So the next day, I resolved that I had to go back to that same street at the same time of day and see if I can find him. And I did, walked up and down the street for several blocks. And after 15 minutes, when I was just about ready to give up, I spotted him sitting all alone on a bench. So I walked up to him and I said, who are you and why did you stop me the other day? And he said, I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to answer your questions and help you on your journey. And that was the beginning of a dialogue I had with this man that went off and on for the next several months. And he told me that he was one of my spirit guides in disguise. His name was Albert. He had manifested himself in physical form as a homeless man to get my attention, to draw me into the conversation. And after the first 3 meetings that we had when he was a homeless man, after that, we communicated by telepathy. He didn't actually materialize anymore. And he told me I was the only one who could see and feel him in physical form, and anybody else who was passing by in the street that day, they would have seen me sitting all alone on the bench talking to myself because they couldn't see him. So it was very interesting. So he answered all the big questions I had and many more. And then early on, he really surprised me. He took me aback because he said, look, I'm not just here to satisfy your curiosity. I want you to write a book about my revelations so they'll be available to all humans. And I was a bit concerned about this because I'd never even dreamed of writing a book before. But he was very
I mean, it's not the typical sort of trajectory of a 34-year corporate lawyer, right?
No, exactly. No, I was just too busy. It never even occurred to me to write a book. Anyway, a year after I first met him, I retired from the law because it just seemed irrelevant to me at that stage. And I knew that basically in my heart that Albert met me to set me off on a new path. And I had to follow the new path, and that path didn't involve practicing law, so I retired. So I continued with these conversations, this dialogue, question and answer, took good notes about what he told me. I was concerned about writing the book because I was a straight-laced, stuffed shirt corporate lawyer. That's how people knew me, and I was concerned about what they might think if I wrote a book about my conversation with my spirit guide. It was quite out of character for me. So I struggled with it for a while. Finally, I decided, okay, I'm going to have to write this book and get it published and let the chips fall where they may. And so I published my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. Gotcha.
And so Dancing on a Stamp is essentially the whole story of your encounter with Albert. So you're saying that you first actually saw him, what you thought was physically, a few times, and then you started... It sort of opened up because you hear a lot of stories about people communicating with their spirit guides, right? And not very often have I heard a story, although I have heard, stories of people encountering what they believe to be angelic entities or some sort of manifest spirit, right? But majority of the time you hear about spirit guides and people are like, in meditation and communicating with them and things like that. So it's a bit unusual for him to, appear physically, as you would say, and then, but after he sort of broke the ice, it was no longer necessary. Is that sort of why?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. When I asked him why he showed up initially as a homeless man, he said it was his way of easing me into the conversation, because had he just started communicating with me as a voice in my head, I probably would have thought I was losing my mind. So he decided to show up physically. We had a talk, and then once I was comfortable with him and his voice, then we communicated by telepathy. He no longer needed to show up physically. So that was his way of easing me into the conversation.
Interesting. Had you had, there's a lot of people, who have, once again, have these sorts of experiences with their spirit guides, and it's sort of a lifelong thing. As a child, I started talking to my spirit guide and so forth. I mean, was this your first sort of metaphysical or psychic phenomenon that had happened to you up to this point, or had you been having, other types of experiences like out of body experiences and so forth?
This was the very first experience. And Albert says he was my guide from day one when I was born, but I wasn't aware of the fact that he was my guide, and he never tried to communicate with me until that day on the street. So this is my first experience.
Wow. What a trip. So I'd love to hear some of the sort of wisdom that, not having read your book. And I often say on the show, Garnet, there's so many fascinating authors and stories and insights coming, bubbling up in the world at this point, right? There's so many people doing so many fascinating things and have so many fascinating stories. And I find myself, really busier than ever with my own life. And what I love about the show is the ability to kind of get access to people who have amazing stories like yours and sort of hear them firsthand. So I haven't had the chance to read your book. I would certainly like to, but maybe you can, for those of us listening, kind of give us what, sort of sum up what you were taught in you relayed in Dancing on a Stamp.
Yeah, the major revelations. First of all, he said, we're all eternal souls. We came from the spirit side, or the other side, or beyond the veil, or some people call it heaven. That's where we came from. That's our true home. And the reason we're here is because we freely chose to incarnate as humans on this planet. And we did that to learn and experience things, to experience what Earth has to offer, to grow and advance as souls. So we actually chose to come here. And before we were born, we all prepared a sort of a life plan, which set out the major aspects of our new incarnation. Things like the place we'd be born, the identity of our parents and siblings, the first language we learned, first school we'd go to. We set that all up, and a number of other things to sort of help us along with our goal of learning and experience things that we needed for our advancement. And so, in answer to the question that I often ask to myself, when I'm looking in the mirror on Monday morning shaving, and I say, who am I? Why am I here? It's basically, I'm an eternal soul. I incarnated here by my own choice to learn and experience things. So then the other part of that is that as a child growing up as a Roman Catholic, I was taught that God put us here by his volition, that God made a bunch of rules for us to follow. And if we didn't follow those rules, when we died, we'd appear before God. Yeah, we'd be judged by God. And if we were bad people, we'd be sent to an awful place called hell. Albert says that's all nonsense. It's all fiction created by, the religious holy men over the centuries to, rule people by control people through fear and judgment and guilt. And he says, no, God or the source does not make rules for us to follow. God didn't tell us to come here, didn't put us here, based upon what he wanted us to do. We came here on our own volition. And when you die, there's no judgment and there's no punishment. Everyone goes back to the spirit side from where we came from, which means, and this is very concerning to some people, even murderers and terrorists go back to the same place as the good people when they die. And that's just because there's nowhere else to go. Hell does not exist. It's a fiction created by religious holy men to control people through fear. And so that's a major deviation. Basically, what he said flew in the face of most of what I was taught as a child by the Christian church. So that was like an eye opener. And he said, when you're having a bad day, or your things are going badly for you, you shouldn't shake your fist at God and say, why are you doing this to me? Or at the universe and saying, why are you visiting me with all this tragedy? He says, you came here on your own volition. You created your life and you have free will to make decisions and take actions here. And so your reality really is created by, first of all, your pre-birth planning. The second thing is what you do once you're here. Because once you're born, you don't remember where you came from and you don't remember that you had a life plan. And so that's the real challenge of being a human on Earth, a challenge we all knew about before we decided to incarnate here, but we chose to do so anyway. So here we are. Why am I here? I put myself here. That's the short answer.
Right. And so curious, and obvious, what I love about these sorts of stories and these sorts of experiences that people have. And of course, I've had the pleasure of interviewing people from everyone, people from Eben Alexander, who has a very famous near-death experience story, to people who talk about their experiences in meditation and, and so many, using plant medicines to sort of have these sorts of experiences. And they all almost, without fail, come back to the same sort of, thought, the same sort of concept, and that is just what you said. We're all these spiritual eternal beings who chose to incarnate in this dimension. We have a case of amnesia. We're waking. The goal is to wake up in the dream, so to speak, of human form, and then start creating more consciously than we are doing so, or have been doing so collectively and traditionally as a species. And so it's for me, it's a great sort of element of proof to this stuff that, to a lot of very scientific minded, quote unquote, grounded people who, this is all woo woo nonsense. It's like you have all these stories from all these different types of experiences, and they almost always come back to the same conclusion. And that is, it's all one. We've done it to ourselves, and it's time to wake up. And to me, that's fascinating to observe as I explore, consciousness beyond human waking consciousness from so many different perspectives.
Yeah, no, well said. And the fact that all these different messages from very many different people, authors and people over the world, is the core message is basically the same. And that to me is validation, Brandon. It's validation that we're all on the right page.
Right. Now, I know you've written several books about your adventures with Albert, and your second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, it actually goes into a series of astral adventures you took with Albert. Is that correct?
That's right.
I was about to say my experience, having never had an out of body or experience or astral experience that I recall consciously anyway. I have a pretty interesting story. When I started down this path originally, 20 years ago, sort of similar to yourself, waking up from, being taught this very conservative kind of dogmatic, hell and brimstone version of Christianity. And as I started exploring other things, one of the first books I ever read, and I still have it, is called The Psychic Explorer, and it's all about astral travel and this guy's adventures in the astral realm and out of body experiences. And I was fascinated by the concept, and as I started doing the research, even more fascinated to find lots of other people claiming similar type experiences. And I started talking to my brother about it, who is very much still sort of I guess you might even say brainwashed into what we were raised to believe is the way, God is this jealous God who's going to torture you if you get it wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And he was like, oh no, you're crazy. What are you talking about? And, but I had told him some of the techniques the guy was talking about in Psychic Explorer, how you could have these out of body experiences and astral projections. And one of the ways was through lucid dreaming, becoming awake in your dream and sort of saying, I want to leave my body now. And he said, well, you sound crazy, but that lucid dreaming thing, I know what you're talking about. I used to have those as a kid. And by talking about them, it triggered him to start having lucid dreams again. And this time he thought, oh, well, let me try what Brandon was talking about. I want to leave my body. And next thing you know, he had some wild adventures, on the astral plane, as they call it. And he went from making fun of me one day to looking like he'd seen a ghost the next, because he actually, had these same type of experiences. So I just, I think that's an important piece to mention to people who aren't too familiar with astral projection out of body experiences. I know from firsthand experience, one of the closest person to me in my life, my brother, having no belief in this sort of stuff, but then going and sort of discussing it triggered him having his own sort of experiences. So, I just thought I would throw my own little astral journey story and how it actually was the very beginning of my spiritual awakening story, really.
That's quite a story, Brandon. I'm glad you told that, because it just goes to show you that people's experience with astral traveling can come in so many different ways, and a lot of times it comes from people, or happens to people who don't believe in it beforehand. And I certainly didn't. I didn't really believe in astral travel until it happened to me. So it happens to a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who have it who don't even mention it. They're afraid to.
Yeah.
So that it happens more often than you think.
Right. Yeah. Well, I actually had someone on a while back who wrote a book all about his astral adventures. And and sort of just a very interesting interview. Oh, I'm blanking on his name. I'll look it up here in a moment. But from listening to that episode, a good friend of mine, it triggered her to have her first astral experience, out of body experience. And so, it was once again, this friend was like, "Oh my gosh, I just listened to your interview, and then the next day I had this experience where I was taking a nap, and oh my God, I left my body." And so, for those who aren't too familiar, and of course a lot of my listeners are, I think it's important to sort of reference these type of stories where someone is not really seeking it out and it happens. So in your case, I'm assuming this thing, it sounds to me like things sort of progressed with Albert from your first meeting, which was apparently physical to you, then to sort of communicating with him, hearing him in your head, so to speak, writing your first book. And then was it just a progression where he then took you on these astral adventures?
Exactly. And what happened was that after I'd finished my first book, I didn't hear from him for a while. And then all of a sudden one night I woke up in bed and I saw this ghost-like figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And as it moved closer towards my bed, I could see it was my old friend Albert, but he was in astral form. And I said, Albert, hi, what brings you here? He says, I'm going to take you on some astral adventures, astral trips, because I want you to write about what you hear and see in your next book. And it's like, okay, that means I have to write another book. And so then he literally, he reached out and grabbed my astral hand, pulled my astral body out of my physical body. I turned around and looked, and my physical body was still sound asleep in bed. And there I am in astral form. First time I remember that. And he said, come on with me. And he just led me up through the ceiling. We floated up through the clouds to a high point above our beautiful planet. That he let me sort of turn around and take a look at our planet Earth, which is very beautiful from that perspective. And then we went through a shimmering doorway to the spirit side. And there I encountered a number of different people, had a meeting with the Council of Wise Ones. And then that was the beginning of my astral trips. And then, after each trip, he would bring me back down to Earth, to my bedroom. My astral body would slide into my physical body. Then the next thing you know, I'd wake up the next morning and I'd be in my physical body, but I clearly remember in vivid detail everything I'd seen and heard on my previous astral trip. And then I would just sort of go to my computer to quickly write down what I saw.
Wow.
And so these were a number of different trips on different nights. He never told me when he was coming, and it wasn't sort of consecutive nights. Sometimes it would be, 3 or 4 nights in between. I never knew when he was coming, and I never knew where he was taking me. But he clearly had a set agenda that he wanted, places he wanted me to see, and people he wanted me to talk to. So it was all sort of his agenda. He was my tour guide.
Wow. What a trip. So you talked about sitting with the Council of Wise Ones. A couple questions. One, how many adventures did you take that led to the completion of the book? And that stuck out to me as something I'd love to hear what the message you got from the Council of Wise Ones. It sounds like it'd be a wise message. So
Yeah, a few dozen trips I took with him. I'd have to go back and count them myself.
Right.
And so that was the first set of astral trips. Then he took me on another set of astral trips, totally different, which resulted in my third book, Dance of Heavenly Bliss. And then after that, he came back again for another set of astral trips, which is in my fourth book, which is not yet released, that is called Dance of Eternal Rapture. So there's been 3 different sets of astral trips. On the first one is where I met the Council of Wise Ones, and that's a body of very wise and advanced souls whose job it is to oversee all the incarnations on Earth. So they will review everyone's life plan, and they'll give recommendations to say, that's too tough, that's too easy, why don't you try this? But the final decision it belongs to each soul, but they're there to sort of oversee all of this. And they had a message for me. They said, look, we want you to take this back to your fellow humans. We think your civilization is at a very crucial point in its development. You have very advanced technology, but your spiritual and emotional intelligence has not kept pace. And that means that there's a lot of people on your planet who let their negative emotions like fear, anger, hate, and greed get out of control and rule their lives. That results in a lot of conflict, a lot of violence, a lot of crime, wars, genocide, terrorist acts, and so on. That's happening on our planet. And they said, we're really afraid that you guys have to change your course and become better at embracing love and compassion before you destroy yourselves, because you have weapons of mass destruction, which literally could wipe out all life on your planet. and we don't want you to. We don't want to see that happen to you guys. It's happened to human civilizations on your planet before that have risen up to great heights, and then they crashed and burned, like Atlantis and Lemuria and a few others you haven't even heard of. And she said, the chair of the committee, Sophia, said, we don't want that to happen again to humanity. So we want you guys, our messengers, and you're one of them, to go back and try to tell your fellow humans we have to discard our negative emotions and embrace love and compassion before it's too late. So that was their main message, a very, very crucial message for humanity. Wow.
What a powerful experience. And for you, I mean, your first time especially, was it, it's funny you talked about, being kind of pulled out of your body and looking and seeing your physical body there. That was the same kind of experience my brother had his first time. He's like, I thought to leave my body. Next thing I know, I'm standing there. I can move my hand in front of my face, and it's sort of like energy trails. I see my physical body laying there, and then I fly through a sort of a opening that happens in the ceiling, and all kinds of weirdness ensues. So were you just in shock in this state when you were there? Was it did you feel very calm and at peace, or what were you feeling like as you experienced this?
As soon as I left my physical body, I was a bit concerned, like, okay, what's happening to me? I've never done this before.
Am I dead?
Yeah, am I going to get back? What's happening? But then Albert soon calmed my nervousness, and with him sort of guiding me, taking me by the hand, I became very comfortable with it very fast. And then when I went to the spirit side, and spirit side, just a lovely place. It's just like incredibly beautiful place, full of souls that there's nothing but love, unconditional love, no negative emotions, no anything. They're beings of energy over there, as we all are. So I felt very comfortable once I got there. And the Council of Wise Ones was their message was very an amazing message to me. I was honored that they chose me to be one of their messengers to take their message back to Earth, and I felt very comfortable. So I had no concern after that. Once I got over my initial fright, I was okay.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And then when you came back to your body, it was like, because of course that's one of the things you hear oftentimes is, you come back, or you hear it said, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are. You hear it said that we all have these out-of-body experiences, these astral travels every night. We all actually have, sort of these other lives even on the astral plane or astral dimension where we're working and doing things when we sleep, and we just have amnesia to that once we come back. And so, of course, it's unique for you to have full recollection to write your book. But I'm curious what your thoughts are if you would agree that is indeed what's happening, that particular idea or concept that we all go there all the time and just not all of us are remembering.
You're absolutely right. And that's what Albert told me. He said, we all leave our bodies every night and go into the astral plane over to the spirit side. We huddle with our guides to try to figure out, how we're doing on our life plan. And we come back every morning, but we suffer amnesia. We're not allowed to remember that. And that's just to make it more challenging for our experience on Earth. Because if we remembered where we came from and what was in our life plan, it would be too easy for us on Earth. It wouldn't be much of a challenge. It'd be like a teacher giving her students the questions and answers to exam before the exam. Like, what's the point? What's the point? We came here for a challenge. And so that's why we don't remember these things. But you're dead right. Every one of us astral travels. Only a few of us are allowed to actually remember them. And Albert said, in my case, I'm allowed to remember the details of my travels because he wants me to write a book about them, or 3 books now, 4 books actually. So that's why I'm allowed to remember them. But I don't remember my astral travels when he's not there with me. I'm like everyone else. I wake up in the morning and I don't remember anything.
Gotcha. And how often are these sorts of, obviously you're on your 3rd book, 4th total, 3rd all about your astral travels. And we're going to dig into more of those sort of insights and lessons that you've been being taught. But how often, at what period of time did the astral travels start, and how often, what's the frequency?
Well, they started in about, let me just try to recall now, probably in about 2014, and they've been sort of off and on, since then. Over the last 2-3 years, and frequency it varies. I mean, he might come, a couple times in a week, or he might not only show up, once in a month. It's sort of up to him, and I never know when he's coming, and so it varies a lot. And he likes to give me time in between to sort of absorb what I've seen and heard, and give me time to sort of make notes about my trips, so that I can eventually put them into a manuscript and get a book published. So it varies quite a bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, you know what? And I just looked up. I was going blank earlier on. It was Jason Quitt who wrote a book called Forbidden Knowledge, and it was very similar in the fact that he's sort of taken out of his body and taken to even ancient times, ancient Egypt and Atlantis and things like this, where he's being taught, sort of going to the astral school, if you will. So I'm curious if that sort of lines up with some of, as we dig into some of your experiences there, if that lines up with some of what it's like for you. Is there a schooling element for you in your astral travels?
Well, I think there's a certain learning experience that happens with every one of my astral travels, not necessarily to teach me how to become a better astral traveler, but basically to teach me things about life on Earth, and a nugget of wisdom for me to pass on to other people. But in terms of traveling back to ancient Egypt, I had something similar to that. Maybe that's what this other person had. Albert took me to the Akashic Records quite often to view things in, past events, past lives that I've lived, or past lives that other people have lived. The Akashic Records, as you know, contains the record of every life ever lived anywhere in the universe. And so,
like Google for the universe, right?
Exactly, and it's there. And I've seen a lot of the things from the past, very interesting, in the Akashic Records, and I think that's probably what this other fellow saw. Is really quite fascinating, and it's the kind of thing you could spend eons there looking at your own past lives or other people's past lives or famous historical events. But Albert didn't let me stay there as long as I wanted. He said, come on, we have other things to do. And so I had just very brief glimpses of things in the past in the Akashic Records.
Wow. And when you looked at these things in the Akashic Records, was it like watching them on a movie screen kind of experience? Like, what was the, can you give us an example of something that you sort of peeked in on, and what the quality of that experience was like?
Well, it's sort of like watching. It appears in a big holographic globe that was sort of floating in the viewing room, and when the scene came up, it was like watching a 3D movie. And Albert knew how to control it. You could sort of zoom in real close. You could zoom out. You can pan left, pan right. You can speed up the scene. You can slow it down. You can jump from point to point. Albert was very good at this. And so one of the things I saw was a human civilization that actually lived among the dinosaurs. And our archaeologists and anthropologists don't think that humans lived back then. There was a human civilization back then. I actually saw it in this holographic globe. And it was they lived very close to the land. They didn't have a lot of technology, and they actually hunted dinosaurs for food. And they had a very egalitarian society. I could see the dinosaur. They actually hunted a dinosaur once and then hauled it back to their walled city and just made it in time before a T-Rex came, charging after them, who wanted to sort of get what they had killed. And the unfortunate thing is that through no fault of their own, they perished when the asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago and kicked up massive volcanic eruptions all over the world and dust and everything else. And basically, they ended up with a nuclear winter for 2 or 3 years, which killed off most of the dinosaurs. And this poor human civilization was buried under 200 meters of lava from a nearby volcano. That's why nobody's found it yet, but it was in Central America. So that was one of the amazing sort of scenes I saw in the Akashic Records. And Albert's point was, humans have been on this planet for a lot longer than you guys think. Here, I'll show you an example.
Wow, what a trip. That is the real land of the lost, right? If you remember that old show.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got some notes here on some of the things and experiences that you had that, they're all so fascinating. I'll just pick some. One of your visits was to a new Earth. Can you speak on that?
Yes, the new Earth is our planet in a higher vibrational dimension. It exists contemporaneously with our Earth. It just it's in a higher vibration. And Albert took me there, and he said, "Look at this is where all humans on your planet should aspire to go to." And how you get there is to raise your vibrations, expand your consciousness, raise your vibrations. And he says there have been humans from our Earth who have made the ascension up to the new Earth. And I met with the descendants of a civilization.
He said there has been from our Earth. Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. There's been a lot of people that have made the ascension, sometimes in groups, sometimes individually. I met with the descendants of people that their ancestors had lived in Central America a long time ago on Earth, and they made a mass ascension to escape an encroaching army, a barbarian army that was going to, basically massacre them. So they managed to do a mass ascension because they were very spiritual. They went into deep meditation, and they all sort of rose up. They went to the New Earth, and these people that I met with were their descendants. And the New Earth, wonderful place. There's no negative emotions. There's no crime. There's no violence. No one has to work. There's no money. They live a very pastoral life, sort of close to nature. They've learned how to slow down the aging process and ward off most of the diseases. So they live for a few hundred years, and they're very happy, very, very happy. It's just sort of a idyllic kind of a civilization, and that's because they've managed to ascend up, raise their vibrations, and ascend up to this new Earth. So it's some place that we should all aspire to go to, Brandon.
Interesting. So, are you saying that this new Earth is something that, through raising one's vibration now, like you and I are in this current Earth, whatever that means, right? I think we're in the same place. So if you and I are making a very conscious effort to ascend and raise our vibration, we'll actually sort of find ourselves in a new Earth, or in this new Earth, or is there sort of all kinds of Earths in between, and it sort of becomes this, almost an organic shift, like it appears like your world is just improving before your eyes, kind of thing, through events in the world events, let's say, in the culture. It's just like, this year compared to last year, people have really sort of wised up a lot, right? Look at all the good things happening around the world. Or would it be, is it possible for someone to sort of pop out of this Earth, which is kind of the idea I got from when you talked about this civilization and the barbarians that were, approaching. How would that work? Could you kind of elaborate on? Hopefully, you understand what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah, no, exactly. Albert says it'll help. It'll happen sort of almost instantaneously when you get your vibrations at a level that matches the vibration level of the new Earth. You'll just pop up into the new Earth. So you'll be here one day. All of a sudden, bang, you're gone, and you're in the new Earth. And you'll just sort of all of a sudden open up your eyes, and it's like, hey, this looks like my planet, but boy, is it ever different. And as soon as you sort of see what's going on, it'd be like, okay, now I know where I am in a new Earth, and it's much different. And thank God I left the old Earth behind. So yeah, it sort of happens just like that, instantaneous.
What a trip.
But you have to match your vibrations to those of the new Earth. Otherwise you can't get there.
Sure. It's the way to travel, right? So would it be, this is a very fascinating kind of concept, and it really makes me think of, you hear about the rapture with, religion, and certain, I guess, denominations of Christianity talk about the rapture coming in, sort of this ascension kind of idea. And it really makes me think of that, us popping off of this, like, so would my being be sort of gone from this dimension, or is it more like I would sort of reality shift, dimensional shift into this other version of the avatar character that is Brandon Beachum? Like there's one of them there on this new Earth, and I would sort of start looking through those eyes, this piece of my consciousness. Or would it be like my physical being literally disappears from here, and my being sort of reappears there where there was no Brandon before?
It's the latter case. Your physical body actually disappears from this Earth dimension and just pops into the new one. So if people were watching you when it happened, you would suddenly just sort of disappear from sight, and there'd be no trace left of you.
Wow. Yeah, and that's interesting because of course, I've always sort of had the theory of how you can shift between your potential selves. And so there's a version of me who, we didn't do this interview today, or there's a version that, you're making a big decision. Do I take this trip? Do I, take this job? Do I, and there's all these different versions. So this is almost like something different than that, it seems. Almost like a more radical level of shift. If you will.
It's quite a radical level of shift for sure. It doesn't happen very often because, like most of us on this planet, the reason that we can't raise our vibrations to get there, Brandon, is because we let ourselves sort of be controlled to some degree by negative emotions, like fear, anger, and hate. And the only way to get your vibrations up high enough is to get rid of all of those negative emotions and fully embrace love and compassion. That's easy to say, but very difficult to do because we all have those flare-ups of anger and and fear and everything else. Yep. That's what's holding us back.
Yeah. Wow. Do you believe that there will be, and has Albert given you any sort of insight into the success rate of people ascending to this new Earth in the future? Sort of an increasing rate of success as we slowly but surely collectively begin to wake up and raise our vibration on this Earth?
He hasn't given me any numbers, but he did say that there's more and more people becoming spiritually aware and raising their consciousness and making a very strong effort to try to raise their vibrations. So there's more and more people doing that, which means, of course, there's going to be more and more success. But it's not going to be sort of like, having half of the United States suddenly disappear because it's not going to happen that fast. Yeah, but it is getting better. But he didn't discuss numbers with me, so I can't really say whether it's 5% or 10% or 0.5%. Don't know.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, so now in your journeys, you've also experienced some other planets as well, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen?
Well, one of the first planets he took me to was a planet that he called Proteus, and it was many light years away from Earth. When you're traveling astrally, it's virtually instantaneous travel. Sure. And anyway, we ended up coming to this planet, which is a water planet, totally covered with oceans. There's no land masses. And so we dropped down through and the ocean looked like oceans on Earth. We dropped down under the ocean, and the undersea world, the colorful fish and the coral and everything else looked much like the undersea world of Earth. And oh, wow. So he took me towards a large coral formation, and there was a dolphin and a humpback whale. And we communicated by telepathy. And they said to me that if it looks like our world here is much like the undersea world of planet Earth, it's because much of the sea life, both animal and plant life on your planet came from our planet. It was transported, seeded by extraterrestrials a long time ago. That's why it looks so familiar to you. And in fact, wow. The dolphins and whales on your planet, they originally came from Proteus. They were seeded by extraterrestrials. And they said that they stay in telepathic contact with their cousins on planet Earth. They're the dolphins and whales here. Wow. And they told me that they were very distressed at the stories they were hearing from the dolphins and whales on Earth, who were very upset at the abuse they've been suffering from humans over the last few centuries, being hunted and killed, trapped in sure. In nets, polluted, having to deal with polluted ocean water from pollution that humans spill into our oceans. And so they felt very unhappy about it. They said they wanted to live in peace and harmony with humans and wish that humans would treat them with more respect and recognize that they are intelligent and sensitive creatures, and they should be they should be given that sort of respect. And so their message to me was, can you please go back to your fellow humans and tell them that dolphins and whales really want to live in harmony with you guys, and please stop abusing them. Right.
Interesting. What a fascinating sort of concept of these sea creatures being brought from elsewhere. And now you had also had an interaction with the consciousness of Mother Earth. Is that correct? With Gaia?
Yes. Albert took me to meet Gaia, or to speak with Gaia. Basically, he took me on an astral trip over the North Pole of Earth. We dropped down through the ice cap, dropped down through the ocean, and down through the seabed, went into this very large cavern. And all of a sudden, I heard this voice, this very melodic voice, which turned out to be the voice of Gaia, which surprised me a bit because I didn't realize that our planet had a consciousness, but Gaia is the consciousness of our planet. And so she had a very interesting message for me. She said, she said she's very fiercely protective of all of her flora and fauna on Mother Earth. And she wants all of us to live in peace and harmony in a very balanced and ecosystem where nobody's sort of dominating anyone else. And she said she's very disturbed with the domination that humans have been inflicting on her planet over the last few centuries. We not only abuse each other, but we abuse her other animals, and we pollute Mother Earth with our pollute her air, pollute her water, pollute her soil. And she's very upset about that. And she really wants us to sort of change our ways, because she said if we don't, it could end very badly for us. And so that was her message, change your ways, human. We have nothing against you. We want you just to live in peace and harmony in a very balanced ecosystem. And you've got to stop your pollution. You've got to stop it because it could just end very badly for you. And so that was her message. And interestingly enough, she says that she has the power to fiddle with some of the natural disasters that happen on our planet, like hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, and so on. And she says she's been increasing the number and intensity of those over the last few years as a warning shot across our bow to get us to wake up and realize that we have to change our ways. Very interesting conversation.
I find it very interesting. You had mentioned that her voice was very melodic. Could you expand on that? Was it like a song of sorts when she was speaking?
It sort of was. It was very almost musical, very very pleasing. It was very pleasing to hear. It's hard to describe. You'd really have to hear it. But it was very. It wasn't like how you and I talk. It was sort of a musical, melodic, harmonic. It was very pleasant to listen to. It's something I'd never really heard before, but that was sort of how she came across. And this is by telepathy. That's her telepathic sort of projection to me, which I found quite unusual.
Wow. Yeah. What's interesting is there's a few synchronicities. I talk a lot about synchronicity on the show, serendipity, those sorts of things. And there's been a few things with this episode, even prior to us turning on the mic today and recording, that I'll talk about in a moment. But, one of the things that jumped out at me is, this book, Psychic Explorer, probably the first book outside of, the consciousness expanding, very first book I ever read 20 years ago or so. I haven't really, looked at it in a while, but there was this kind of jumped out at me because we were talking about it. And then I note that you've talked to Mother Earth. Well, a couple things. One is, in the back of that book, there's channelings that this individual brought through one was from Mother Earth, from Gaia, and it was her message to mankind, and it was a very similar message to what you're saying now. So there's that kind of interesting synchronicity. And then also you mentioned her voice being very melodic, and if people go back and listen to my very second podcast, and we're on like number, 350 some now as we record, but my very second podcast, I share some interesting sort of synchronistical and paranormal stories of my own. And one of the biggest in my life, and I recount it in that episode, and I've recounted it a few times since. I won't go into it all now, but one is where, my partner and I a few years ago were at an event, and she had been singing this very melodic song for many times. We would get kind of in a heightened vibrational state. She would sing the song, and then we meet a girl who is kind of in awe of us, and as we walk away, she goes into trance singing the same song that my partner had been singing for the previous months, and we both are like, what is going on? And this girl goes into a full trance singing the same exact melody, and then she starts adding words to it. And I always say, and if you listen back, you'll hear me say it, I felt like she was channeling the spirit of Mother Earth, of Gaia, in her communication to us. And it's, like I said, it's kind of that's a very Cliff Notes version of the story. If listeners want to go back and hear the full story, it's really fascinating. And, it was tied to this very melodic song. And then all of a sudden, a message started coming through, and then she snapped out of her trance. And it was, very interesting to kind of hear you mention that piece.
Fascinating story, Brandon, and I'm sure that she was connecting with Gaia. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, I mean, the synchronicity is pretty thick. So, and speaking of Gaia and feminine energy and those kind of concepts, on one of your astral trips, you went to a place with a matriarchal human society that was actually run by women. Is that correct?
Yes. And it came in response to a question I had to Albert when I said, Albert, do humans exist only on planet Earth, or do they exist elsewhere in the universe? He said, oh, yes, they do. He said, come, I'll take you I'll show you one civilization, which is very unique, quite different from yours, and it might give you some food for thought. So we went to this planet, and it was a very modern planet, very modernistic, like something you might see in a science fiction movie, with flying cars and moving sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. And it was, I met with the ruler of that planet. Her name was Marpesia. She was the empress of the planet. She told me that the planet was ruled entirely by women, that men had no voice in politics, in business management, anything. They could not have jobs or positions of authority. They could not vote. Wow. And everything was run entirely by women. And she says she said that the men are not subjugated or abused or violated in any way. The men are happy to go and pursue recreational activities or artistic endeavors, or just have fun. They don't have to work. They can do menial jobs if they want, but they have sort of a very pleasant existence. And they're not upset at the fact that women are ruling the planet, because that's the only thing they know. They're happy. They think that's the way it is. And so they're not upset by it. And I said, so how did this all happen? She says, well, eons ago, their planet was a very patriarchal planet ruled by violent and abusive men. And the men subjugated the women and abused the women and controlled the women. And then one day, one of their ladies had a vivid dream. In a vivid dream, a spirit came to her and said, if you pick this plant that grows in your forest and you feed it to the men, it will drastically reduce their testosterone level. She did that, and she passed this message on to all the other women. They fed it to their men. Gradually, the men became very docile and very and sort of not caring about they didn't fight anymore. They didn't care about position or power, and gradually the women just took over. And ever since that, she says they ensure that this continues because all the male babies are chemically sterilized at the age of 3. So they don't have high testosterone levels, and so that's how they maintain their society as a totally matriarchal society. And I said to her, don't the women sometimes get into disagreements? Don't you fight? She says, sometimes we have differences of opinion, but we always resolve them very peacefully. So there's no violence among the women. There's no jealousy, no negative emotions about who's running the shop. So they all get along very well. It was a very peaceful, harmonious society, which is really in contrast to sort of ours. And one of the funny things was that as I was leaving that planet, I said to Albert, has this civilization ever journeyed to Earth? He says, no, they don't yet have the capability of traveling between the stars. And I said to him, oh, good, because I was afraid I'd have to rush back to Earth and warn all the men.
Yeah, but would you is the question. It sounds like a really nice society. If I get to, don't warn me. I want to just do artistic endeavors and play all day while someone else takes care of everything.
Except Brandon, you would have no sex drive. There's no sex there.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So how do they procreate then? It's all sort of artificial insemination kind of thing?
Yeah, it's artificial insemination, and it's from a sperm bank from a few chosen males who aren't sterilized. And they harvest the sperm, they artificially inseminate the women. There's no sex between the men and the women. She says sometimes the women might choose to have sex, with another woman, but the men are sort of totally out of the picture. But she says the men don't miss their sex drive because they never remembered having it because they were sterilized at the age of 3. So anyway, It sounds like a nice society, but it wouldn't be for you, Brandon.
Definitely doesn't suit my personality.
Nor me. But anyway, it was just a marked contrast to our planet. And I said to Albert, surely there's got to be a happy middle ground between their extreme and our extreme where men and women can be equal and just get along fine. And he said, yes, that's where you should be heading.
Yeah,
that's where you need to go.
That makes sense. That's an interesting thing for him to show you, though. That truly is sort of the other end of the spectrum of what we're used to, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What a trip. So, okay, let's continue. These are great. Every story is so interesting. So, on the spirit side, you had a meeting with Mary, the mother of Jesus, right?
Yes. Very fascinating because, as growing up as a Roman Catholic, Mary was a very crucial part of sort of that religion, being the mother of Jesus. And so it was very fascinating to meet her. Very lovely, wise soul. I met her on the spirit side. She had lived her last life on earth as Mary, the mother of Jesus. She had some very interesting things to say, most of which sort of flew in the face of what the Christian holy men had been teaching forever. And she said, first of all, my conception was not immaculate, through the Holy Spirit, whatever. I conceived my child, Jesus, normally through my husband, Joseph. I wasn't a virgin when he was born, and I had other children after Jesus. And so all that stuff that the Christian church has been saying about me is a falsehood. They wanted me to set me up on a pedestal, and they thought that I'd be a more holy person if I was a perpetual virgin, and that Jesus was conceived through immaculate intervention. But she says that's just all an invention. He was born normally, through my sexual intercourse with my husband, Joseph. And away you go. So, and she says that she thought there was something special about Jesus when he was growing up. She thought he was a special kind of guy. She wasn't quite sure where he was going to go. But and the other amazing thing, which a lot of other people have already surmised, is that Jesus actually married Mary Magdalene. He was married to her. They had children. Of course, the Bible and the scriptures don't say anything about that because they've all been edited from their original version. Right. But he was married, had children, and he was a master soul who learned how to focus his thoughts on very powerful beams of energy. That's how he created his miracles, walking on water and raising people from the dead, turning water into wine, and so on. He did all those things. He did that to attract attention because he wanted his followers. He wanted to gather as many followers as he could to hear his message. Yeah. His message was really one of love, for your fellow men, forgive people. And, and that core message is still very valid. And I said, well, why didn't he, if he could perform miracles, why did he let himself be crucified? And she says, well, he could have prevented that, but he thought his crucifixion and then ascension would make a very dramatic statement for his followers, and he hoped that his followers would promulgate his message after he died. And they eventually did. They formed a religion, the Christian religion, which the core message is still there, but they've gone offside in a lot of their dogmas and beliefs. But the core is still there. So very interesting story. I just love talking to her. She's a fascinating soul.
Wow. So. That is very fascinating, and I've often said it, being sort of raised in a similar fashion to yourself with very conservative Christian ideals and a lot of fear-based thinking around it all. I strongly believe that Jesus was sort of doing the same sort of work that a lot of people are now doing, which is teaching that love is the answer, that we're all one with the source that created all things. He said essentially that he was God in a sense, right? And so that just was sort of misinterpreted and taken out of context or looked at in a way that sort of put him on a pedestal where he taught, you will do greater things than I, right? And we all have the ability to sort of, with the faith of a mustard seed, move a mountain and all these things that he taught. I personally believe he was really teaching the same. He's sort of the Beatles of this movement, if you will. And that's always been my take. So it seems like anyone who's had a spiritual experience with Jesus, or in this case, Mary, his mother, it always seems to kind of come back to that same kind of ideal.
Exactly. I know you hit the nail right on the head. And I know a lot of other people have had similar encounters to mine, and the message is all the same. I mean, he came here, like you said, to teach us that love is the answer. And to some degree it's worked, and to a large degree it hasn't, but that wasn't his fault.
Yeah,
he did his best. Yeah.
Right. It's, I find a fascinating concept. Jesus was a man. Christ is a state of consciousness, right? Like Buddha consciousness. It's sort of a path to awakening. His methodology of tapping in and tuning in and, bringing forth more source energy as a clear channel. All right. Well, there's a couple other. Okay, so to kind of expand on a little bit of synchronicity here. So I was sitting here, looking over some of the notes and experiences that you've had on the other side. And one of the things that jumped out at me was you saying that, you had an experience with the goddess Athena. Well, I have a friend named Athena who my brother used to date, and now another good guy friend of mine, longtime childhood friend, just happened to stop by, who's pretty close to this girl Athena still. I see her maybe once a year or so, but he sees her all the time. And I'm like, the goddess Athena. Well, at the same time, my son comes in 5 minutes later to introduce me to his new girlfriend, whose name is Athena. So wow. I'd love to hear what the goddess Athena had to say to you, and I have a feeling it will be particularly relevant due to the synchronicity here. So what was that like?
Well, she said she lived her last life in ancient Greece, and she was a priestess in the temple, and she was very adept at giving people advice on life, on relationships, and so on. And because she was a master soul, she is like Jesus. She could focus her thoughts into powerful beams of energy and do things that people would describe as miracles or magic or whatever. And because of all these things that she did, the people there decided that she was a goddess, and so they called her the goddess Athena. And so she was like Christ. She was there to sort of help other people, expand their consciousness and to live their lives in a loving fashion. And so that was her mission. So when she left that incarnation, she's back on the spirit side. I met her. She was a breathtakingly beautiful lady, just gorgeous, but very wise, very serene, made me very comfortable. And so we had a very nice conversation. And she said that one of the things she said that I always remember, she said that, people on earth are always asking, what is my life's purpose? And she says, you're not supposed to know exactly what you had planned for yourself, because that would make things too easy. But you need to find your life purpose. You really got to listen to your guides. Try to hear the messages they're giving you. Mainly through meditation. Get rid of all the clutter in your mind. Listen to what your guides are telling you, because they'll try to steer you in your right direction. She says that it's not easy, but the bottom line, she says that if you feel like your life's on balance and everything's moving along as it should, then you're likely on the right path. You're probably following the path that you planned for yourself. On the other hand, she said, if you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall, you need to back up and find another route, because you're clearly off course. So that was something that always stuck with me. It's sort of like, okay, I'm not supposed to know in detail, but if I feel like I'm banging my head against a brick wall, I'd better find another route, because I obviously need to change course here. So very good, wise advice from the goddess Athena. A very lovely, beautiful, and wise soul.
Right. So if things are flowing smoothly, you're in the flow, and if things are difficult and tumultuous and there's a lot of anguish associated with it, you're off track. That seems to be quite logical. Yeah. Now, another creature that you actually had an interaction on the astral plane with, a mythical creature. Now, I helped to form. I actually mentioned that I see this my brother's ex, or a girl he dated rather, Athena, and my friend who just happened to stop by, who still sees her all the time. I see her once a year. I see her at Burning Man, and at Burning Man, we are part of the same camp. It's Intergalactic Sasquatch Village, and I helped to found the camp many years ago. And so you had an interaction with a Sasquatch, right, on the astral plane. Of course, let's continue right along with the tie-ins here. Tell me about the Sasquatch.
Well, Albert took me on one of our astral trips to the Pacific Northwest. And there in a secluded forest, way far away from any civilization, we dropped down into a meadow. And all of a sudden, from behind the trees came a Sasquatch. She was about 8 feet tall. Her body was covered in dark brown hair. She had sort of a very short neck or no neck, kind of an ape-like head. And we communicated by telepathy. She was on the physical earth plane, and I was in the traveling astrally, but we communicated by telepathy. Her name was Xana. She said that her race, has been living on Earth for eons, on all the continents except Antarctica, and that they are very afraid of humans. And so they make a very conscious effort to avoid contact with humans because they're afraid that they'll be, killed or abused or, put up in a circus sideshow if they're ever caught by humans. They're very intelligent and sensitive creatures, and they live very close to nature. They don't have any technology. They don't want any technology, and they communicate with each other by telepathy. And the reason they've been able to avoid humans so easily is that because she said they have sort of like a animal sensitive radar that can detect other animals and especially humans from many miles away. So they can basically sense us coming from a long ways away, and they quickly disappear. They live in underground caves and cities. During the day, they come out at night to forage for food, and they're very good at avoiding humans. And her plea to me was, we'd like to live openly with you humans. We'd like to live alongside you in peace and harmony. But you guys are just too violent. You're too abusive, and we're afraid that you will just harm us. And so we're not going to come out in the open until you guys change your act and learn to live peaceful, harmonious lives. And so that was her story. Her race is going to stay hidden until we change our ways. But it was a very interesting conversation. I know there's a lot of people who swear that there are Sasquatches. Many who said they've seen them or seen footprints and so on. And that was really the final proof for me was that I actually met one face to face.
Right. Wow. Quite interesting and very interesting that you're saying she was in complete Earth physical and you were in astral during the interaction. I guess that's the only way you could get close to her, right?
Yeah, and she was Albert allowed her to see me in astral form, even though she's in the physical plane, and we could communicate by telepathy. That's how we sort of interacted. So Albert made all this possible. I don't know how he did it, but that's sort of the scenario. They are she was very much in physical form on our Earth plane, but I was able to communicate with her. So it was really quite a fascinating encounter.
Wow. Now, is there any encounters? You've had so many fascinating encounters. Is there any that I haven't asked about that you would love to share that you think we would enjoy hearing?
Well, one of the things which I think will be heartening to a lot of listeners out there is that I had an encounter with one of my guardian angels on the spirit side. Now, I was always people have always said that some people believe we have guardian angels who sort of look out after us. Before I met Albert, I was sort of skeptical about that anyway, but I met my guardian angel, one of them.
And this is different than Albert. Albert being like a spirit guide, guardian. Can you kind of explain the difference?
Well, Albert is a soul just like us. He's he's had incarnations on Earth. This time around, he chose to be one of my spirit guides, which are just like coaches. They coach us while we're going through our life journey. So he's like us. Angels are different kind of spirit. They don't generally incarnate. They're there sort of to do to help out with people during their incarnations, but they don't usually incarnate themselves. And our guardian angels are angels who are assigned to look out after us, and they're there to make sure that we don't suffer an untimely demise before our time is up, and our souls decide when it's time to leave. Nobody dies by accident. So even if 300 people die on a plane crash, that's no accident. Every soul decided that was the time and the place to exit. And so because there's so many people running around on our planet all exercising free will, there's a good chance that something not unpredictable may happen that could cause our death before our souls are ready to go. That's where our guardian angels step in, and they will basically intervene to make sure that we don't die before our souls are ready to leave. And so it was a very fascinating conversation. She says, we can send you strong messages to change your way so that you don't end up in an accident, or we can physically intervene if necessary to make sure that it doesn't happen. And she gave me an example. She said, for example, if you are scheduled to board a plane that we can see is going to crash, we will send you a strong message a few days ahead of time to change your plans. And if that doesn't work, we can make your tire go flat on the way to the airport so you miss your flight. So that's just one example. They can manipulate matter. They can actually appear physically for a period of time to get you out of harm's way. There's a number of ways they can excuse me, arrange to make sure that you don't end up with an untimely death. So very comforting, and every one of us has one or more guardian angels who are with us from birth until death.
Very interesting and very reassuring to know that you have someone there just to make sure it doesn't happen prematurely.
Exactly.
Well, Garnet, this has been absolutely fascinating. I love juicy stories, and man, you are full of them from your experiences. I look forward to actually going and digging deeper and checking out your books and your forthcoming book. When will that be released, and what is the best way for people to kind of connect with you and follow your work?
My fourth book will be released sometime this summer. I don't have an exact date yet, but my first three books are all out and available. People can connect with me on my website, which is garnetschulhauser.com. That's difficult to remember. So if you Google Dancing on a Stamp or Dance of Heavenly Bliss, you'll get to my website. There you can find information on all my books. You can I have buy links there to all the popular online stores like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many others. You click on that, you get right to where you can buy my books. You can dial into all my social media sites like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. And you can actually watch a book video for each book. And you can also listen to the recordings of all of my previous radio shows. You can access them on my website. This is radio show number 119 for me, Brandon.
Wow, that's a lot. That is incredible. I mean, that's like having your own show, but on, all these different outlets. What a great thing. And I can see why. You are an absolute fascinating storyteller, and your message is truly inspiring.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And I do have one last question for you before we go. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to Garnet Schulhauser?
The meaning of life is to learn and experience things that your soul needs for its advancement. And even though you don't know exactly what that is, it's a matter of trying to listen to your guides and try to figure out where you should go, so that you can so that when you finish this life, when you look back in your life, you can say, okay, I made a few mistakes, but I did many of the things that were right. And I'm glad that I lived that life, and I'm looking forward to my next one.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Garnet, for taking the time to connect and share your stories and your inspiration with us all. I really look forward to following along on your journey, and we'll have to circle back around and do this again sometime. Thank you for having me, Brandon, and I'd be delighted to be on your show again. All right. Well, until next time, journey well, my friend. Take care. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world, because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.